Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome to another episode of Sree's daily global COVID-19 show. My name is Sree Sreenivasan, and it's my honor to convene this daily conversation around all things COVID. We talk about various aspects of the pandemic, including the health, financial, and inequality crises. But we also look at politics and various industries and how they're coping. Tonight, we have a special Friday night episode of The Joy of Reading. Marva Hinton is our guest, our special guest for a special topic. She's the host of the Read More podcast, in which Marva interviews authors about their work and the books that have shaped them as writers. We'll discuss what she's learned, what she's reading, and what the state of books is during the pandemic. Please tag and share with your friends right now. They can join us live or later. And please tell us, what are your favorite books? What are you reading during the pandemic? We would love to know. And you will meet Marva in just a minute. Hi, everyone. I'm Sree. Thank you so much for being here. I'm the Marshall Loeb Visiting Professor of Digital Innovation at Stony Brook School of Journalism and the co-founder of Digimentors, a social, digital, and virtual events consulting company. Our motto, don't cancel your event without talking to us. Don't even plan your virtual event without talking to us. You can find my email address right here. We've done events for 50 people and 100,000 people. I bet your event is somewhere in between. So please email. We love to geek out and talk to you about what's possible and what's not in the world of virtual events. If you're joining us here for the first time, in our first 200 episodes, we've had more than 1 million viewers, 148 million social impressions, 357 guests, 208 of them women, from 67 cities and 19 countries, including the chief scientist of the World Health Organization. Our archives are all on youtube.com/Sreenet. Please give us a subscribe when you can. And we're in partnership with Scroll Global and Scroll.in. We're able to do this because of our awesome sponsors and our awesome producers, Rose Horowitz 31 on Twitter and Vandana Menon on Twitter, Vandana_Menon on Twitter. Please connect and follow them. Let's tell you also what's coming up. Because it's a Friday night, we often do a Saturday morning show so that our producers get Saturday night off. So let's tell you what we have coming up on Saturday morning. We have a show with Lauren Freyer will be here. Lauren is the the India correspondent for NPR, and she'll be here at 9 a.m. Eastern. So you don't want to miss her. That's at 9 p.m. Eastern on Saturday. And then on Sunday night, we do our very special episode about art healing the world. And we're going to learn about the Asima and Friends of Asima auction by Entrepreneur. And you'll meet Grace Jo Dilber Parak and Christine Biancheria. So watch for that. And we also have a great event that we are producing and partnering with called the Impact Summit 2020. And that's Saturday, October 10th, tomorrow from 1 to 4 p.m. Among the speakers are Meena Harris and Vanita Gupta talking about civil rights. And we will also have the 4 South Asian members of Congress, Ami Bera, Pramila Jayapal, Ro Khanna, and Raja Krishnamurthy will all be here. They're just among the 30 speakers from 1 to 4 p.m. It is all free. You can access it. Just register on the link you see on your screen right now on the bottom right, iaimpact.org/summit. iaimpact.org/summit, 1 to 4 p.m. free event with fabulous speakers. You don't want to miss it. Now, are you ready to talk about books? There are some of the books that I've looked at this summer and read and talked to you about, and we'd love to hear about your interest and what you're thinking about with books. And remember, we're live on Facebook, on Twitter, on YouTube, and on LinkedIn. So tag your friends right now so that they can join us. And let me bring on stage Marva Hinton. She is the host of the Read More podcast, and she's going to tell me, among many other things, how she finds time to do all this reading. So please welcome Marva. Hi.
Hi, Sree. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for being here. Well, I say I'm great, but I like to say I'm great compared to with everything going on. You have to take all the blessings you can get given the state of the world. And that brings me to my first question is always, how are you? Where are you? And how has your family been handling the pandemic?
Well, I'm doing all right. As you said, you have to take your blessings where you can. My family lives in Miami-Dade County in South Florida. And as I'm sure you've heard, we've had it pretty bad with the virus in this area. So for us, it's just been about being as safe as we can and still staying in as much as we can. My husband and I are both very fortunate in that we can work from home. So we're able to do that. I'm a freelance journalist and an editor in addition to being a podcast host. My husband is an IT consultant, so that's something he can easily do from home. We have 2 kids, a 6-year-old daughter who is in 1st grade and a 2-year-old son. So we stay busy.
Yeah, that sounds like a handful there.
Yes, very much so.
And what has it been like in your community with the virus? What has it been like in your neighborhoods and further than that?
Well, it's interesting because I feel like my family is taking the virus very seriously, but I'm not sure if everyone else is. We still see a lot of people doing gatherings. Like where we live, for example, we're very close to a community pool. So I can just look out and see the gate surrounding a community pool. And sometimes there are just a lot of people out there. I mean, it's still, South Florida is still really warm here. So that's not unusual, but it's just, when I see people doing that, and my daughter's asking me, well, why can't we go to the pool and why can't we, do X, Y, or Z? It's hard to explain. Well, we just don't feel like that's safe right now to be around that many people who are not in the household with us. So that has been a challenge explaining that to her. She has some friends who've gone back to school, but we're still keeping her at home doing online learning. And so that was another difficult conversation, just to say, some of your friends will be going back, but we don't feel like it's right for you to go back just yet.
And it's so hard for them to understand. I have 17-year-olds and they turned 17 during the pandemic. And of course they find it difficult too, as well, at a different level. Right.
Yes. I mean, I'm sure your teenager at least can understand it. The 6-year-old, we just say there's a bad virus going around. People are getting sick. And so we want to keep you as safe as possible, to explain why certain things are off limits right now.
Boys, I wish someone would talk like that to President Trump. He could have maybe understood what was going on. If you just talked in that tone to him, maybe our whole course of this pandemic would have been different if he just understood, as we would explain to a young child, this is why we're here. This is what we need to do. Instead, he himself became a super spreader. We're going to try to keep politics out of tonight, so that we can talk about books and the joy of reading. And tell us about your podcast, the Read More podcast. You can't be more clear about about what your podcast is about. So tell us how you decided to do that, and a little bit more about it. We'll show folks the podcast as well.
Well, it started for me about 5 years ago. I come from a radio background, and in 2015, I actually decided to leave my position in public radio here in South Florida and to go off to be a freelancer. At that time, I just had one child, and I was working the early morning shift. So I was going in to do morning editions. It was super early, and I just decided to try something different. I've always loved reading. I mean, my mother sort of instilled that in me. She loved to read. And so I've always found authors fascinating, and I love to interview authors. And so I decided, why not do that? Also, the show primarily features writers of color because, as you know, the publishing industry is a very white industry. It's not very diverse, and sometimes it seems like these writers don't get their due. And so I like to feature them, especially young writers just starting out, although I've also had some very experienced and very well-known writers on the show as well.
That's great to know that that's the start of it. So how did you put that together? Of course, it's almost no fair. You already have this great radio background. So how did you manage to take that experience and pull together your own podcast?
Well, I had contacts in the Miami area from working here for several years. And so I was able to lean on them to help me. We have a large book fair here every year, the Miami Book Fair International, which is each November. Um, this year, of course, it's going to be an all virtual event due to COVID. But the people I knew from the fair, I was able to reach out to them and say, hey, I have this idea to do a podcast. I mean, can you help me? And my first guest was Edwidge Dantica, who I knew from my career in radio. And so I was able to go up to her, a big name writer, and say, hey, I'm starting this show. Would you come on it? And she was nice enough to say yes. And so she was my first guest. And since then, she's been on a couple more times. And I guess it comes from being a journalist. I don't mind approaching anyone or reaching out to their publicist and saying, hey, I'm doing this show. I'd love to have you on. And most of the time, people are very nice and they will say yes. I mean, before the pandemic came, I was doing all of my interviews in person just because I feel like the sound quality is so much better. But with COVID, I had to, start doing these by phone. But I've had a lot of success with getting people on and getting to meet some really cool people and talking to them about their work. Another thing that helped me is there's a very large independent bookstore in the Miami area called Books and Books. And so that brings a lot of authors into Miami. And so I would kind of look at their schedule and see who they have coming up and see if I could reach out and say, hey, while you're in Miami, can I talk to you about your book?
That is so cool. One of the things that obviously I'm seeing here is such a great diversity in the kinds of folks you have. And they're not always the kind of folks you see in many of the podcasts or the video interviews and things like that. So talk about why that is important to you, please.
Well, I just think representation is so important. I mean, I think back to when I was in school, and it was very rare to be assigned to read an author of color. I mean, I was thinking back when I was in high school. I don't remember ever being assigned.
Read more podcasts.
Sorry.
That's all right. I don't remember ever being assigned a writer of color to read. I remember there was a project where I could choose, and I believe I chose to read something by James Baldwin, but it was never just like all class reading. So you know how most high schools will read To Kill a Mockingbird, or you'll read, I'm just drawing a blank here, but those typical high school novels, and never a Black author. Toni Morrison, for example, is my absolute favorite author, and I didn't read her in a class until I went to college. I didn't get that chance in high school. I have some nieces now who are in high school, and they tell me that is changing, at least where they are. They're getting a little bit more diversity.
So that's a start. So you feel like your being able to do this would be making up in part for all the time that you didn't get to do this when you're growing up?
Definitely. And it's also just what I like to read. I just feel like I learn so much from reading about or reading books by authors from different cultures. I'm in South Florida, where there's a very large Latinx population, and I didn't grow up in that type of environment. I mean, I grew up in a small town in North Carolina. There were, at that time when I was growing up there were no Latinx people there. There was, the little town I lived in, there was one Asian family, and everybody knew them because they were the only Asian family in town, So I just feel like it helps to broaden your horizon so much to read about people who are different, whose experiences are completely different from yours. And I think everybody should get that opportunity. And so many people kind of keep their reading in a box. They don't like to venture forth, but I think it's such a great opportunity to learn and to just have more empathy. I mean, I know there have been studies that show the more you read, the more empathetic you are to others. And I think that's definitely something that we could all use.
And I would certainly believe that. Tell us about this wonderful drawing you have.
Well, that drawing, I met an artist here in the Miami area. There's a small publisher here called Mango, and she worked for Mango Publishing, and she was kind enough to do this for me. That's supposed to be me there surrounded by books, and that was just a fun project, and I appreciated her doing that because that is not my skill set. I'm not in that way, I'm not artistically inclined. And so that was her rendition of me sitting on a pile of books.
Now, how close is this to reality? How often do you get to sit among all your books? Or do you have to keep cleaning up and putting things away since you tell that to your kids all the time?
Well, it's interesting you say that. We moved, my husband and I moved from one part of Miami-Dade County to another part right in the middle of the pandemic. And I still have a lot of my books are actually in boxes right now. And so I will not show you what it looks like in front of me, where I have a lot of books just stacked up on the desk, because there's my TBR stack is always really fat. And
the TBR is to be read?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes,
I didn't even know. I was guessing. Yeah.
Yes, it is. And so I have, I'm in preparation for a guest coming on the show. I've got a lot of books, and also just books that I'm reading on my own for interest. So, and of course with the kids, I now am surrounded by books for the kids. For my 6-year-old, she's reading now, and so she's got all her books. My 2-year-old, he likes to read, so he has. It's very funny to see a 2-year-old sit down and pretend to read. He loves to do that. So I've got all the little books for him as well. So and my husband also, he's also a reader. He tends to like to read nonfiction a little bit more than I do, and I tend to go more towards fiction. So there are a lot of books, and there are a lot of boxes that we still need to unpack. But books have just always been around me, and I keep them. I mean, I buy books. I also go to the library. I used to frequently go to the library before the pandemic hit. Since the library reopened here, I've only been once. There was just something I really wanted to get, and so I went and saw it, and it's just interesting to see all the new protocols that are in place to try to keep everyone safe. But I just love it. As a child, that was like my favorite place to go. And I remember having to get special permission. I don't remember how old I was, but I remember hearing something about Anne Frank, and I wanted to read the Diary of Anne Frank. So I wanted to go check it out at the library, but it was not in the children's section. It was in the adult section. So I still remember having to talk to the librarian about it. And I guess she figured I was mature enough, and she let me check that book out.
And now you can imagine what all kids can access so fast from anywhere in the world. We're going to play a little excerpt from this episode that you picked out, episode 36. Set it up for us, please, and I'll hit play.
Okay, this is T. Kira Madden. She wrote a memoir about growing up in some really rough circumstances. She grew up, actually spent part of her childhood here in South Florida. She came from a very well-to-do family, but both of her parents had substance abuse issues. And so she writes about what that was like growing up without the proper supervision.
Okay, so shall I play it right from the start here? We'll play it
you can if you want. I'm sorry I didn't get to cut these clips.
That's okay. Don't worry. Please don't worry. We just want to get a flavor. So you tell us.
Yeah, you can start. I mean, this is a pretty intense one. I don't.
I know it gets more intense about, as you said, about the 15-minute mark. So here, we'll just play the first 2 or 3 minutes. And when we do that, we'll give you a chance to catch your breath and we'll take you off camera so you can also share with your friends and family as well while we're doing that.
Okay,
Thank you.
that'd be
So
great.
here we go. I'm just going to hit play. Let's see.
Podcast is brought to you by the Miami Book Fair International. 8 days each November and all year round with writing workshops, author events, and more. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Read More Podcast, the show that brings readers and writers together. I'm Marva Hinton. Recently, I sat down with Takira Madden at the Freedom Tower in downtown Miami to discuss her memoir, Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls, which was published earlier this month. Takira's memoir includes the graphic depiction of a rape. Listeners who find discussion about sexual assault triggering may want to fast forward through that portion of our interview, starting at around the 15-minute mark. You grew up here in South Florida, in Boca Raton, in the 90s and early aughts. Your family was very wealthy and you didn't lack for material things, yet your life was still very troubled. Both of your parents had serious substance abuse issues. You're also biracial. Your dad was a white Jewish man and your mom is of Chinese and Hawaiian descent. And you struggle a bit to fit in. From an early age, you were taking care of yourself because of your parents' alcoholism and drug use. And you were put into some pretty dangerous situations because of this. But somehow you managed to come out on the other side and you're very successful now. When you think about your life and everything you went through and what you're doing now, do you call yourself a survivor?
Sorry, taking a moment. That's a really beautiful question. I like the word survivor. I think in the end, this book is about resilience. I think because of the title, and I love the title as well, people tend to think of it before they read the book as a male-centric or father-centric book for father or lack of father. But in the end, through the writing of it, I realized this book is about resilience and specifically the resilience of women, in my opinion.
You write a lot about secrets in this book that shaped you both as a child and even now as an adult. You also reveal a lot of family secrets in this memoir. Were you ever worried about how your family and friends would react to this?
Absolutely. It's a task I took incredibly seriously. Writing is my job, and it's a job I consider the greatest privilege of my life, writing and teaching. And because of that, and I think everyone is different, there's no end-all be-all answer for all memoirists or writers. But in my case, I had to make a decision of who I wanted to consult, who I wanted to ask permissions versus to show them pages and say, what do you think of this? Did I get you right? Did I get the situation right? In my specific particular case and story, I decided that my mom mattered to me and my brothers. So those were the people I went to with the work early on. My mom, most of all, she's the one I asked for permission from day one before I started writing until I turned in the final copy. Even post galleys, I was considering anything she wanted changed. But it was a really important dialogue for us to have over the past 3.5 years of revisiting memories, some in which we never wanted to kick up those memories again, and really discussing the responsibility of bringing those family secrets to light, things that we've never brought into the room before, I was now going to bring in the room through literature. And ultimately we decided that it was a positive thing, that these things didn't need to be continually buried and buried and buried and buried, and that by, I hope, providing a beating heart and pulse behind the people in the story and a larger context, that it could be accepted finally and brought into that room brought into the room with love, I suppose.
We're just going to pause there. What a wonderful interview. Takira Madden, interviewed by Marva Hinton, our guest today on my show. We were listening to her show. It's called the Read More Podcast. So everyone, please check it out. Takira Madden is the author of Long Live the Tribe of Fatherless Girls. And this was the interview. And you can find this and all the podcasts at readmorepodcast.com. And we're going to resume our conversation with Marva Hinton in just a minute. In the meantime, everybody, please share and post with your friends, tag them so they can join us, and tell us also, what are you reading and what do books mean to you during the pandemic? I'm going to ask Marva that question, and Marva's on Twitter, Marva A. Hinton, Marva A. Hinton on Twitter. So please follow her there as well, and check out readmorepodcast.com. We have lots of comments that have come in and we will read them. So I'm going to bring Marva back onto the stage with me so we can chat about books and about her wonderful podcast. So here she is. I hope she caught her breath and also had a chance to share and interact with her friends online. And here she is. Hi, welcome back.
Hi, Sree.
What was it like to hear yourself and that very important, very moving conversation with Tikira again?
You know, it was nice to hear that because I like that I get to talk about important issues and things that are difficult but important. I think she is just incredibly brave to talk about what happened to her as a sexual assault survivor, but also as someone who just survived a pretty rough childhood. I mean, as I mentioned there, I mean, she grew up in a very well-to-do family, but there were so many problems. And I think that just goes to show rather, that you can't always tell what's going on with someone from the outside. I mean, they may live in a big home and drive fancy cars, but you know, there can be some real turmoil going on sometimes in those households. And I think that's important to show. And it's also important to show that she came out of it on the other side, and she's a very successful writer now and is doing well despite that rough upbringing that she had.
Thank you. And that's what writers do, right? They're able to put all of that into their books. And then when they talk about it, some of them might not be as comfortable talking as they are writing. What else did you learn with all these author interviews? I've also done a bunch of author interviews, at least 40 authors or so, but it's very different when you're using radio and audio and the podcasting. This video stuff, I think, throws people off and is a different, less intimate, even though we can see each other, it's less intimate than radio.
Well, I think what I've learned is that a lot of them, sometimes, especially if it's a bigger name author, I get a little bit nervous talking to them, you know, and I think, oh my, this person is so accomplished and so smart, and oh my goodness, what is it going to be like? And I find out that a lot of times they're regular people, you know, maybe they're nervous about doing an interview. And I was, why are you nervous talking to me? You know, you're this big time author, but I find that some of them are incredibly shy. I guess they like to speak on the page. And some of them are just really open. I mean, I have, as I mentioned, you know, Edwidge Donica was my first guest, and we were, before the pandemic hit, we were going to do another interview. We ended up eventually doing it by phone, but before the pandemic hit, she would offer to just have me come to her house to do the interview because she's a local here in South Florida. And that's what I mean about just being so open and really kind and helpful, very encouraging to me.
That's great. And I think it feels to me like South Florida has a lot of writers, right? Like people like to live there. The weather's good, and you're surrounded by interesting people doing interesting things.
Oh, definitely. I think it might surprise people who are not familiar with the region, but there is a big literary scene here. As I mentioned, we have a large independent bookstore called Books and Books. We also have this huge book fair every year that brings people from all over the world normally. But as with so many other things, this year it's going to be an all virtual event. So we are, I think it's the good weather, as you said, that attracts people, but also just it's a kind of a quirky place. I mean, and everyone talks about how odd Florida is, but South Florida has its own sort of odd personality, very, they're like so many other places. I mean, there is great wealth inequality here. I mean, we have some very, high-end communities and some people who are really struggling. There's still there are a lot of different cultures that come together here, that also makes this a very interesting place to live.
That's so interesting to hear about that for folks who may not know this as well as you do. Let's take a look at some of the comments that have been coming in. Jonathan Borstein's watching from the East Village. He's watched 213 episodes in a row.
Oh, wow.
And
super fan.
that's the right thing to say. He's also an incredibly well-read person, so great to have him here. Pradnya's watching from Silver Spring, Maryland. By the way, do you have a favorite memory of New York you want to share with us?
Sree, I haven't been to New York. I'm ashamed to say, since I was a little kid. I haven't been. Wow. So I need to get back to New York. But yeah, I haven't been there since I was a little kid. And what I remember for that trip as a little kid, growing up in a small town, North Carolina, I had never ridden in a cab before, and I thought it was so exciting.
Well, yeah, as you know, they're in the old days, meaning before March, there are all kinds of wonderful podcast festivals and all of that. So when they're back, we've got to get you up here.
Oh, definitely.
Reason too.
Definitely, I want to make it up there. It's just like I said, it just hasn't happened.
And tell us about Washington D.C. area memory.
Washington D.C. area. Well, I've been to a lot of conferences there in Washington D.C. I also have family that lives there. Both my brother-in-law and his family, and my sister-in-law and her family live there. So we get up there quite a bit to visit with them. But it just seems like there's always a conference going on in DC. So I get there for conferences. Probably the biggest memory, though, I have is that when President Obama had his first inauguration, I was there for that, and I got to cover that for the station I was working for at the time. And that was just, it was just such an amazing thing to see, just to be among so many people. It was quite an event.
I remember watching it on TV and just seeing those. Remember later on, 8 years later, there'll be a discussion about the crowd size. But that first inauguration, that crowd, and in the cold, no less. I'm sure it was January, yeah, and it was cold. Yeah, I remember that.
Super cold that day.
Ashok is watching from Kerala in India. Have you been to India or Asia?
I have not. It's interesting. My husband spent some time in India while he was working on a project. And oh my goodness, I can't remember the city that he was in. But he seemed to really enjoy his time. He was there for a while working on a project. And he said it was just kind of interesting to meet so many people there and see the differences in the culture. Just one thing I remember he always tells me is that no one that he met actually believed he was an American, because they would think if they see, a Black person in India, they assume that you are from Africa. So he had said he had to kind of go through that with everyone he met, but that he really enjoyed his time over there. So maybe we can, when the pandemic ends and we can start traveling again, we can figure out maybe we could go over there with the family just to give the kids, because our kids haven't had a chance to travel internationally yet.
Yeah, I'm not sure. India is always the best place to start for the first international trip, but along the way, if you went to a couple of other places, I think it would be awesome. I will say that in India, there are thousands of African students that come and work, study there, and go get college degrees in many parts of the country, mostly in the north, but also in the big metros and the metropolitan cities. And so that's probably why, because you don't really meet a lot of African Americans, and that might be part of the reason. Let's see. We have lots of people saying hello, including Stefan Kaplan says, wonderful to be here from Ramsey, New Jersey. And look at what Pradnya is doing. She's tagging friends after friends after friends, which is just including authors like Tanya James and Asim Chabra, who would be wonderful guests on your show. And, yeah. And
I just remembered, my husband was in Hyderabad. Is that
Hyderabad.
Hyderabad. Yes, that's where he was for a while.
Yeah, it's home of wonderful tourist and tourism and culture, but also fabulous food. And always jealous when people get to go to Hyderabad. Fernando says hello from LA. How about an LA memory for us?
Oh, okay. LA. I remember I was out in LA, which I think that's a beautiful part of the country. Like, I love Santa Monica. I just think that's such a beautiful community. But I remember I was there in December and I was so cold. I mean, maybe this was unusual because I hear it's supposed to be, I was thinking it would be like Florida weather. Maybe I just happened to be there at a bad time, but it was so cold. I remember I wanted to see the Pacific Ocean. So I went and I didn't even get, I had planned it, even though it was winter. I thought, well, I can still get, I know. I did not get in the water. It was freezing. So that's my memory of LA, and also being extremely, lots of traffic. And I didn't feel so comfortable driving because I didn't really know where I was going. And I said, I don't know if that, that part of it's for me, but I did enjoy it. I actually went to a grad school program out there at Antioch University, Los Angeles. That's where I got my MFA. So I spent a lot of time out there for those 2 years. And it was, like I said, beautiful part of the country, but I didn't understand, why is it cold in December? Because I'm used to Florida. It's never cold here.
I have a theory, because I'm always cold in LA, always. And that's because from growing up and watching all these surfer movies and beaches and things like that, you think it's permanent summer, and LA gets cold. I mean, it's colder than you think, and that's what makes it really cold. And that's what it's about, especially if you're down by the water. And so you experience that as well. My mom's watching from Kerala in India. Hi, Amma, love you. Great to talk to you this morning, and then to talk to you here. And then Charles is watching. Charles and Mary are watching from Chicago. I'll ask you for a Chicago memory. Charles is not just a viewer. He is also a sponsor and an author. His book is called The Inventor in You, and it's about how you can reinvent yourself and invent things you wouldn't even know that you had ideas. And it's a fabulous book. It's a step-by-step guide to your first invention. And he's watching from Chicago. So give us a Chicago memory, please.
Well, unfortunately, I don't have any good Chicago memories. I've never really visited Chicago. I've only been there like for layovers. And so it was never really enough time to do anything fun. So that's somewhere I'd like to visit, another great American city that I definitely want to visit once the pandemic is over and we can actually travel again.
I hear you. And Karthik says hello and good morning, because it's already, of course, morning in India. And here's Pradnya still tagging away all these folks. And Olinda is listening from Goa in India. Speaking of beaches and a beautiful part of India, Goa is a fabulous place to go. Here's a question about children's literature and other languages from around the world to bridge the gap of understanding between parentage and new generations. So he's asking a question about children's literature. Have you had a chance to talk to children's authors?
Yes, I've had a couple of children's authors on. Usually I have people on who write YA or young adult fiction. Occasionally I've had some people who write middle grade, which is kind of for tweens. I haven't really had anyone who writes for the little kids, since the show is primarily for adults. I mean, there are a lot of adults who like to read YA, which I think is so important because it really helps you stay in tune with what's going on with young people. It's just kind of puts you right there, because so many times as adults, we don't really know what's going on with teenagers. We think we do. We remember what it was like for us, but things are very different now. And I find that reading that material helps me to feel like I can relate to kids that age. The middle grade that I've read, so enjoyed it. I think I sent you a clip. Pablo Cartaya, he's someone I've had on a couple of times. He writes great books for kids in that middle grade, that like 9 to 12 range. And I think that's important. And I think it's important. He talked about diversity and literature in various languages. I know that my daughter really enjoyed a book that we had, just kind of a silly book when she was a little bit younger, called Yummy Yucky, that was talking about all these things, and it would give the kids the word in English as well as in Spanish for various things with it. And right now, I just, of course, I'm having trouble remembering like the different things, but it would be like, good things to eat, like fruits, and it would talk about like also smelly socks, and kids love silliness like that, and it also helps them, of course, build their vocabulary.
It really does when they can get to be silly. So tell us about this, and I'll play Pablo Cartaya's book. I'll play the podcast.
Okay. The one I sent you, I'm trying to, I think the one I sent you was Marcus Vega Doesn't Speak Spanish. And
I think I only have access to the full. Yeah, that's the one, Marcus. Yeah, you're right.
And there's like a link there if you wanted to play or just let people see. But
yeah,
it was about a boy who was part of a Latinx family. I believe they were from Puerto Rico, but they living in, I believe, the Boston area. And his family travels back to Puerto Rico, and he feels embarrassed because this is his culture, but he doesn't really speak Spanish very well, and he's embarrassed about that. And he doesn't know, like, when he's in his home, he's different because he does come from this Latinx family in an area that's not very diverse. But when he goes to Puerto Rico and he's surrounded by family and friends, and he doesn't feel like he quite belongs there because he doesn't speak Spanish well. And I thought that was such an important issue to present for kids, because we see that sometimes with kids who, maybe mom and dad speak whatever the native language is for the family, but in some cases they don't want the kids to speak that because they want the kids to learn English and speak English very well. And I just happen to remember working with a woman who was in that situation before. And I know it was a source of embarrassment for her because people would, see her and see her name and walk up to her and think she could speak Spanish. And she just didn't quite feel comfortable with it. So I think it's cool for kids to get a book like that, because maybe they're in that situation where they can see, there's nothing to be embarrassed about. It's something that you can work on if that's what you want to do. But I just feel like books like that help kids to feel less alone about their situations.
I hear you, and I understand. It wasn't perfect timing with that question from Fernando. Let's play this clip, and we'll just go from here. Let's take a look. Let's take a listen.
This episode of the Read More podcast is
brought to you by
Two Wings of the Same Bird. So going back there feels like I'm visiting a relative. And so I really wanted to set the story there. I love the island, and I'm also heartbroken in many ways for the island. Not just for the hurricane that devastated so many lives, but also the way that the mainland U.S. Responds to the people living in Puerto Rico and a lot of the unfortunate politics that take place as a result of just bad policies. So I wanted to really show the island for its beauty, but also the complexity that it has. And I was really proud of the response that I got for the novel. And it's a story about the discovering your identity. And many young people really in general, they go many years without realizing parts of their identity that has been lost. And so, you get a kid who was born in Puerto Rico but has not lived there, doesn't speak Spanish, and then goes back and begins to discover parts of his identity that was lost or that he didn't know. And so I really wanted to explore that aspect of the discovery of identity, and using a place like Puerto Rico as the backdrop for that discovery.
Well, what is it about that loss of language that you wanted to explore? Because, I've heard about situations sometimes where a Latino kid may not learn Spanish because his parents don't want to focus on English, because, especially if you're here in the mainland US, you think, well, my kid needs to learn English. And then the language is lost. And sometimes, like with Marcus, you find a kid who is embarrassed because they don't speak the language.
Yeah,
I'm going to pause there. The book is called Marcus Vega Doesn't Speak Spanish by the children's author Pablo Cartaya, being interviewed by Marva Hinton. And everyone, please check out readmorepodcast.com to get the full access to all the shows, and so that you can learn more about not just Pablo's work, but also these great interviews that are done by Marva. And again, it was just great to hear him speaking and talking about books, and just getting this deep dive into books must be so much fun. So tell me how people who want to be on your show, how they reach you, how they interact with you. Do publicists chase you down? How does this work?
That does happen now. Now that I've been doing the show for a while, occasionally I will get publicists who will reach out to me, who will send me an email, or a lot of times though it's through social media. People will come in and say, hey, I have an author I think would be good for your show, and we can kind of talk about that. Sometimes people have self-published books, they'll reach out to me that way. And it's just kind of interesting to me, because I don't know how these people, sometimes they find me, because sometimes I get an email, as I mentioned, I do editing work, and I'll get an email to my work email. I'm like, how did these people find me? And it'll be about a book that they think would be interesting for my listeners. So that's always nice. But I always say that the quickest way, the best way to reach me is I am on Twitter. It feels like 24/7. So if someone wants to just send me a tweet at Marva A. Hinton, we can get together. We can talk about these things. I mean, I also have a Facebook page for Read More, and you can contact me through the readmorepodcast.com page as well, if people want to reach out and get on the show, or just leave a comment. I mean, one thing that I do on the show, just to let everybody know, is every time there's a show, I do a giveaway for the book that I talk about. So just a moment, if I could show you something. Let me see, if you don't mind me looking around. Let's see. I've got, this is the book.
Hold on, I'm going to give you one shot here. Hold on, there you go.
Okay. Prayer for the Living by Ben Okri. He's going to be the next guest I'm going to have on. And after that's over, I will, once the episode goes live, I will always put a trivia question on the website about the book, and people can respond to me either on Twitter or Facebook. The first person to get the answer, to answer the question correctly, I will send them a book. So I just had that happen today. I had a new show come out today with Claudia Rankin. Her new book is Just Us, An American Conversation. And this is one of the rare nonfiction authors I have on. I mean, she's a poet and an essayist, and she writes about important topics concerning race. And the show just came out this morning. It came out like 8 o'clock this morning, and by this afternoon, someone had already answered the question, and I'll be sending them a book very shortly. So it's a good way to get a free book. Before the pandemic, when I interviewed authors in person, I always had them sign a book so that I could, give them something that would be they couldn't just go out and buy. Of course, now because of the pandemic, the books aren't signed, but still, it's always nice to get a free book.
I agree. That sounds wonderful, and that's the new episode by with Claudia Rankin, and you can find it right on readmorepodcast.com. Before we go, let's just take a look at some more of the comments that have been coming in, and let's see here. This is so many comments. I'm just trying to catch up here. Fernando has already tagged other friends. Jonathan says, when I was a kid, I wanted to ride in the jump seats in checker cabs, but was not allowed to. And just I love how people are tagging friends. And then Ashok is telling you to tell your husband, I guess, that Hyderabadi biryani is famous, and he also loves reading. And please come to Kerala after the crisis. And Rose Horowitz, one of our producers, is here at Rose Horowitz 31. She's live tweeting from Milford, Connecticut. I see you had Claudia Rankin on a recent Read More. I have to listen. Toni Morrison is also perhaps my favorite American novelist. So that is cool. They're asking for the podcast link. It's readmorepodcast.com. Readmorepodcast.com. Chicago is awesome, says Terry White Robinson. And some of the best writing today is in the young adult field, says Jonathan. And Ashok says erstwhile Russian literature, and especially children's literature, is famous and interesting. And Linda says, hello, Marva. This issue with kids losing their identity, mostly language traditions, is such a common thread. And Daryl says, on the flip side, some people spend their entire lifetime studying their identity and seeking every little bit of record. Hi, Marva. I want to suggest a guest for your podcast. Ayana Willibus is a 14-year-old who has already written 4 books. You can reach out to her mother, Dimple Willibus, right here on Facebook. And he's also putting in the Read More podcast.
Look at that. Thank you.
And Olinda says, truly enjoying the discussion. Well, we're talking about books, and that's why I'm kind of jealous that all Marva does is talk about books. On our show, we talk about everything from politics to health, and it would be fun to just focus on books, especially fiction, because you are able to travel the world as you read and talk about fiction. In our episodes, we have done a lot of work around creativity during the pandemic, and what the authors must be finding very difficult to not have the book tour, not have even. But some of them are telling me that they're writing more than ever because they have nowhere to go. Is that what you're hearing as well?
I'm kind of hearing a mix. Some people, like you said, they are writing more because there's like you said, nowhere to go, not much else to do. But then other people have said, like, for example, we just talked about Claudia Rankin. She has said that she's not been able to write during the pandemic because it's just, there's so much going on, because it's not just the pandemic. There have been all the protests and just uprisings in cities across the country as people protest against inequality in this country, and they're seeing so many people get sick, and she just felt like it was very difficult for her to work, and so she said she's been focusing on her family and just spending more time with her family than she has in a very long time. As far as missing out on the book tours, some of the writers I've talked to say, but I still got a chance to maybe go some places and do some things I would not have done otherwise through, video conferencing. So, and more people are getting to see them that way than would be able to show up at, say, any individual bookstore. So I feel like writers are finding some pluses and minuses to this quiet time.
I can believe that it really depends on the person and their circumstances, and do they have kids running around the house and things like that, for sure. I'm going to just tell people what we have coming up. In the meantime, after that, I'm going to come to you for some final thoughts. And also, since you've done so much reading, maybe some book recommendations for people looking for ideas, and maybe mix it up a little bit, a couple of different genres. So I'll give you a moment to do that. In the meantime, let me just tell everybody what's happening. It's now 10 p.m. Eastern. At 9 a.m. Eastern, meaning in about 11 hours, we have a terrific show. Lauren Freyer covers India. She is NPR's India correspondent. She's visiting the US at the moment, and we'll also listen to her recent episode on Rough Translation, a great podcast with Greg Warner, How to Be an Anti-Casteist. And we will be meeting Lauren tomorrow at 9 a.m. Eastern, so please do connect with her and watch us on all these platforms. We have a busy day tomorrow. After that, we have our summit with IA Impact. It's called the Impact Summit 2024. Congressional members of Congress will be there, as well as civil rights leaders and entertainers. 30 guests will be speaking. It's a free event. Please sign up if you haven't already. The link is on the bottom right, iaimpact.org/summit, iaimpact.org/summit. Both Mina Harris and Maya Harris will be there from the vice presidential candidate's family, and all these great experts and speakers. So please join us, iaimpact.org/summit. Look on the lower right, and you can sign up for that free conference. And so that's on Saturday. On Sunday morning, we read the New York Times out loud like we have for 5 years. And we'll have a New York Times obituary writer with us, and previous New York Times and theater and TV critic Neil Genslinger will be with us. He's also a Rett syndrome parent, talking about that particular condition with his family. And we'll also be doing a tribute to the great writer who passed away, the journalist Jim Dwyer, died on Wednesday, and we will be talking about him, and Dan Barry will be here to talk about him for a few minutes with us. So that's at 8:30 a.m. on Sunday. And then at 11 a.m. on Sunday, we host a show that I'm honored to executive produce along with my friends, Dr. Sujana Chandrasekhar and Dr. Marina Korean. They're co-hosts of She's on Call, surgeons talking about COVID and so much more, at She's on Call on Facebook and Twitter. They'll have guests. Tamara Lewis and Miranda Van Tilburg will be here. One is a neonatologist and another is a psychologist. So please join us on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. Eastern. And then at night, we will have Art Heals the World, episode 215 of this show. We do Sunday Night Positivity, and we're doing it as we talk about an extraordinary auction to help poor kids in India. So please tune in for all of that this week. We don't take time off on the weekends here, as you can hear. Now, you're ready to hear some great final thoughts and suggestions from our friend Marva Hinton. Please follow her at Marva A. Hinton on Twitter. You can find her on Facebook, and you can also check out readmorepodcast.com. And here's Marva.
Well, Sree, I just want to thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And also, you asked me for a couple of book recommendations. So a couple of things I want to mention right now to people. If you like fiction, I think you should really check out Ya Jessie's Transcendent Kingdom, a very, very good book. She's going to be on the show in a couple of weeks. If you like short stories, again, Prayer for the Living is very good by Ben Okri. I would definitely say check that out. Another short story collection. I'm sorry, just throwing these up.
I love it. Please keep going.
The Secret Lives of Church Ladies by Disha Philia. Sorry, I'm not holding that up correctly. But that's just a very interesting book. It looks at some of the things that kind of go on.
Hold it up for another second. People will take photographs or take notes, so just hold it up.
Oh, okay, sure. This is a really good book. I just have started this one, but I'm really enjoying it. It talks about some of the.
We're missing her first name. Can you just your finger?
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm not good at this. Disha, Deesha, Philia. Philyaw, The Secret Lives of Church Ladies. Really, really good. And also, we talked about international writers. Ben Okri was born in Nigeria, and he spent part of his childhood in London, and that's where he lives right now. A very interesting man. And if you like magical realism, you're going to like these. If you like flash fiction, I mean, the really short stories, you'll like it. And there are also some stories in here that are just flat out weird, but very interesting. You know, he has a very interesting perspective on things. So definitely that's a good one. Just a second. I'm sorry. This is kind of awkward because I have a stack of books on my.
You should tweet out a photograph of that stack at some point.
Yes, it's very awkward looking at it like this. Again, she was just on, but I have to hold the computer up correctly now. Just Us, really. You've got to get this. This is about having difficult conversations about race. And she mentions how hard that is and kind of what the result was when she decided to just do it. You know, just go up and talk to people and also to talk to your friends about it, because so many times, I mean, it's a tough subject, you know, we just kind of like to avoid it, but she talks about what happens when you do have the conversation and when it's kind of like, Sree, do you remember that old show they used to call on MTV, you know, The Real World? I was trying to remember their tagline, you know, basically, so stop being polite, start getting real. I think that's what it was. She talks about how that's how we can kind of meet each other in the middle and become a better society when we just put ourselves out there and are not afraid to have these conversations.
Oh, that's a great reason to read that book. And there's a quick question here. Linda says, I need a photo of the stack. And please give us time for the screenshots if that's why you were holding the books up longer.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. Rose was wondering if you, how do you do this? Do you have like sponsors or advertisers, or or do you use a labor of love? How do you do this?
It is totally a labor of love. I mean, I have tried I've tried to figure out how to monetize this. I'm not quite there yet. I have had some sponsorship by the Miami Book Fair International, by them letting me use their offices and things for interviews in the past, which is very, very helpful, and I appreciate that. But I'm not really making any money. I mean, I do have a link where people, if they're interested, they can buy books on my website, and a very small percentage comes, like a very, very small. It's very, very small. I have yet to make any money. You have to I guess people buy so many to where you get something. So I have yet to make any money through there. But, you know, if people are so inclined, they can buy any of the books that we talk about on the show on the website. So I'll definitely send out a tweet of these. It's just so messy. I don't really like to show it, but I can do that.
Well, thank you so much. And we know that passion projects, when you're doing it not for the money, but you're doing it for these great conversations. You always wanted to have this platform, and now you do. And I know that it's its own reward, but you're helping so many people as well, along with the authors. Folks, our guest has been Marva Hinton. She's on Twitter at Marva A. Hinton. Please find her. Please follow her. And Marva, thank you so much for your time, your good energy that you're sharing with us, and the fact that you get to live and breathe books. What a blessing that is.
Oh, Sree, thank you so much for having me on. I really appreciate it. And also thanks to everybody who's watched tonight.
Thank you. And we'll let you get back to your family and ask your husband about the food he ate. Oh, they might just be rubbing it in if you're doing it at this point. It may not be fair, right? When you're stuck.
He doesn't talk about it. So I mean, he constantly, so I'll definitely ask about the food.
Terrific. Thank you very much, Marva. And we'll see you soon.
Thank you.
All right, everybody, that was a fabulous show, just to be surrounded by books and to talk about books. How lucky is she, and how lucky are we that Marva Hinton spent that time with us. Thank you all for being here. Truly grateful to you. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow, 9 a.m. Eastern. Lauren Freyer will be with us from National Public Radio. She is the India correspondent visiting the U.S. for a bit, and so she'll be here and talk about all kinds of interesting aspects of her life and work. Thank you as always. Please email me, sree@sree.net, if you have any questions or comments. We'd love to be in touch, and we'd love to collaborate on these episodes. We're now approaching episode 215, and we plan to go live every single day, at least through the elections, and then we'll see how it goes. Thank you very much, everybody, and we'll see you soon. And good night, everyone. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.